laugh at everybody, the Muslim greeting of peace to you all. I'd just like to say in the beginning, I really was expecting a bigger turnout, so I'm really disappointed. I'll know not to come to Cardiff again next time.
Smile.
Myself and Chris and Omar have been touring around the United Kingdom for the past several weeks, speaking about the effect of Guantanamo Bay, two sides, one story. The one story, of course, is Guantanamo Bay, the world's most notorious prison that even today, as we speak, is headline news. And our experience as prisoners, as those people held there behind the wire. But what was unique about this tour, what's historic about this tour, is that it's being done for the first time with somebody who's on what's regarded as the opposite side, the other side. And that's with Chris Arendt, who is a brave man. He's a brave man for doing what he's doing at a time like this, and having done so before Obama ever said that he was going to close Guantanamo, which he said when he was inaugurated as president. But I just want to tell you something about how, with the movements that are taking place around the world, whether it's to do with Gaza, whether it's to do with Iraq, Afghanistan, the detentions process and attitudes of countries, something that I learned in my little cell in 2004, in solitary confinement, in Camp Echo, maximum security isolation block. I'd been held there for a couple of years and had been detained by the Americans after I'd been kidnapped from my house in Pakistan, where I had lived and was living with my wife and children after we had evacuated from Afghanistan, where we'd done a project to build a school for girls in Afghanistan run by the Taliban. Not the schools, that is. Afghanistan was run by the Taliban. And we evacuated under these cruise missiles by the Americans, and cluster bombs, and carpet bombs, and phosphorus bombs, vacuum bombs, and smart bombs, and bombs I can't even pronounce the names of. And we made it to Pakistan. It was there in the middle of the night, midnight precisely, on the day of the 31st of January 2002, somebody knocked my door and I opened it and somebody's put a gun right to my head and pushed me into the four walls of my house and made me kneel down with the gun to my head and shackled my hands behind my back and shackled my legs and put a hood over my head and then in the prone position carried me off in front of my family, away for the next 3 years, never to see them again. And after a process of being held in several detention sites, which included the Bagram detention facility, Kandahar detention facilities, and ultimately Guantanamo, I was put in maximum security, solitary confinement, isolation, Camp Echo. And it was there in 2004 where an American soldier came over after the change of duty, or the rota shift. And this soldier was an enigma. He was a strange character because he had served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam as a volunteer, not as a draftee, as a volunteer. He must have been over 60, and I thought, my goodness, the army is desperate because they pulled this guy back out of retirement. And they were, of course, desperate. But he gave me the first real ray of hope that I ever could have imagined. And do you know what that was? He told me that millions of people had marched on the streets of Britain. Millions of people had marched on the streets of London, the streets I know fairly well, against the war. And up until this point, I had really believed that my government, and I think that was true even today, had abandoned me, but more importantly, I thought the people of this country had also. I thought, I'm just another brown-skinned son of immigrants. Why should they care about me? Let him rot in prison. Let his family wait for years on end. Let his children not know what it's like to have a father. Let his child be born and not have his father present for the next 3 years. That's what I thought. But then I heard of the movement. And it wasn't called the Stop the War movement. It wasn't called any movement. It was simply called millions of people were marching in the streets of Britain. And that came to me in my cell. It had its effect for those people who feel that it didn't stop the war in Iraq. It didn't stop the war in Afghanistan. It didn't stop the warmongers. For me, I can say, its ripple effects reached me in my tiny little cell on a 45 square mile patch of American rented soil that they'd taken from the Cubans. And the person who told me about it, that was the important part. Because this man was no tree hugger by any stretch of the imagination. He was somebody that would be regarded as a good old boy. He was a Republican. He loved carrying weapons. He loved talking about his constitutional right to carry and bear arms. And of course, for me, he was the epitome of what I thought was an American soldier, only just a bit older. And my experience there with many of the soldiers was a paradox. Sometimes, and several soldiers said this to me, that to keep a man down, you have to stay with him. You want to keep somebody down, you've got to stay on top of him. Just imagine a judo hold or a jiu-jitsu hold. For as long as you stay down with that person, they will remain subdued. But the moment you get up, they will get up with you. And this was the sentiment of some of the soldiers. And I wrote a book when I returned, and I spoke about the process of what it's like to be a Muslim growing up in Britain in the 70s and the 80s, and what it's like to be an Asian, what it's like to be British, and have all of these confusing ideals of identity and so forth. And then, of course, I talked about my journeys around the world, and ultimately what was it that led to my imprisonment and incarceration in the world's most notorious prison. But I didn't want to just tell my story. I wanted to tell the story also of people on the other side. And one of the things I've often been accused of is that I'm told that I'm too kind towards my captors. But in the interest of justice, it simply means, in my estimation, it's just a question of being truthful. That's all. There's no need to exaggerate. The truth is harsh. The truth is odd and strange enough. It's hard enough to see your compatriots or your co-detainees being beaten to death. It's hard enough to hear the sounds of a woman screaming next door in a cell that you're made to believe is your wife being tortured. It's hard enough to have to undergo the process of being initiated into US custody, which includes being dragged through the mud with your hands tied behind your back and your legs shackled, with a stifling hood over your head and a Marine pulling your head across. It's hard enough to be stripped naked with a knife slicing your clothes across your back that you can feel the cold steel gliding against your skin. It's hard enough being punched and spat at and kicked and shaved so that if you were to look in the mirror, you couldn't even recognize yourself. It's hard enough to watch that happen to other men and remain silent because of fear, impotency. And those are all the truths that every detainee, every person that was ever detained in Guantanamo Bay will tell you that they went through. It's too concurrent and recurrent for it to be a story concocted by hundreds of people from different countries, 47 different countries. They couldn't have all made it up, especially now because interrogators and soldiers and people who were there on the other side have confirmed what's taking place. So that's why I thought it was important for people to hear the other side of the story, but also because to learn about where is it that we in this country, we in the United States of America, are taking our soldiers from. What background, what origin, what state of mind, and what are we making them do? And what are we turning them into? Today, as you may know, Guantanamo Bay is being spoken of, particularly in the case of the man called Binyam Mohammed, who's been detained in Guantanamo for 7 years. He's a British resident, and we believe he'll be released within weeks, if not days. But why is it headline news today? Why is the BBC constantly updating its website, updating its news in relation to this case? Is it because they care about Binyam? They care about this son of Ethiopian immigrants who lived in Britain and was detained in Pakistan and was extraordinarily rendered from there by the Americans to Morocco where, amongst other things, they took a razor blade to his genitalia to torture him, and then sent him to Guantanamo where he lost his mind? Is it because they care about him?